Everybody, my name is Rav Sidhu, and today I'm here to talk about Chapter 14 of the Entrepreneur 2351 class, Strategies for Firm Growth. Now, I know this is not a typical background here, but usually for elevator speech, you're always in an enclosed area. So, for example, if you're right beside someone in an elevator, all you have is the gray background. It's nothing too fancy, nothing too much. So, I just want to keep it nice and basic today, but also creative. We'll be using different types of props and all to represent how entrepreneurs can use these different aspects, such as strategies for firm growth over time, whether you're a startup entrepreneur or even a later on entrepreneur. And we'll tie in different things such as all like internal strategies as well as external strategies as well. So today, for the first thing we're going to talk about is the reasoning on the importance of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship after going through this course of Entrepreneurship 2351. The different types of aspects entrepreneurs and entrepreneurships can learn from a strategies for firm growth, because then also first thing is they can utilize these different aspects to further grow their business, whether that be funding it or just a startup venture that they're starting up as like a young age. Some different types of internal and external strategies they can use. That could be just involving efforts taken within the firm itself, such as maybe producing a new product in their venture, as well as product related strategies. That's some of the internal growth strategies that different entrepreneurs can be using. But also some of the external growth strategies is relying on establishing relationships with third parties, such as mergers, acquisitions, strategic alliances, joint ventures, licensing, and franchise. This is chapter 14, which is on firm growth strategies and how entrepreneurs can use these different key terms in their business itself. Is some more internal growth strategies, which is new product development. So startup companies, for example, they have competitors all over the world. Whether that, depending what market they're in, it could be very competitive. So if they keep sticking to their original products, they will never grow in their business. Whether they're competitors while they're utilizing new business and product developments is very important, because it can attract new target audience, so which will build their business while your crowd and your employers, employees, and consumers are still sticking to the same products, which will die off eventually. So that's a very big strategy that they can use. Another thing is other product related strategies. That's something that it's an internal growth strategy that entrepreneurs can use, and international expansion, which is very big. If you are in a domestic area where there's not a lot of consumers for them to target your product, it's sometimes a good idea to go international and see if there's more consumers that are wanting your product. So whether that be, for example, if you're in the North American region, and the tech is, we can use, for example, a tech company. But Microsoft is big all around. They're internationally well known. They're one of the biggest tech companies out there. So, and one thing there is they're international, so everyone knows about Microsoft, Facebook, all these big tech companies. So very big on international expansion is a very good thing for startup entrepreneurs to utilize, but it could be used on later on. External growth strategies. They can be such as strategic alliances and joint ventures. So sometimes if you are just the one sole proprietor in the company, it's sometimes good to go as like a dual partner. So it'll be easier to just use startup ventures, startup capital, and it'll be a little bit easier upon yourself instead of doing it by yourself. Let me show a quick example of, something I have here is a quote from the great Kobe Bryant, which says, "Everything negative are all an opportunity for me to rise." Now, Kobe Bryant wasn't just a basketball player; he was also a man that had multiple ventures. Whether that would be his book that he published over the years, of just how his whole basketball career was built, and everything else that just went upon his whole career itself. So entrepreneurs can utilize different quotes like that, such as how Kobe Bryant did with that, and just figure out how everything is going to be into place. So some of the examples of internal growth strategies within the chapter 14, which is strategies for firm growth, is startups rely on its own competencies, expertise, practices, and staff. So the big thing is about entrepreneurs, and this is a big thing that they use that also makes them fail with the company, is as soon as they have enough startup funding for the company itself, they tend to leave it off and not really, they just tend it off and just fail upon it. But when it comes up to startups, they usually tend to actually rely on its funding itself and the staff, which makes them successful. That's why when you see all these successful businesses over the years, they've all started off on the deep waters, but then as soon as they start building their team, their funding, their company, the business as itself, they tend to figure out how it is made, like how is it mainly built upon. There's a few questions that we might be asking ourselves. How will all this be utilized in the real world? Now, there's a few questions such as the timing question, where when is the right time for a venture to start in particular? For entrepreneurs, there's never a right time for anything, especially with ventures. If you're going towards a venture, it's going to be a risky journey no matter what. The time, you have to just stick to whatever the time it is. For example, if you're waiting, the longer it is, the more risk you're going to take, and someone else will be starting that earlier than you. So timing is very important. There's no right or wrong time where to use to start your venture. Just start it right away as soon as you get your whole plan together. Another question is the monopoly question. So are you starting with a big share of a small market, or are you starting with a small share with a big market? Now, this question is very important as well, and it utilizes different types of entrepreneurs, such as some entrepreneurs like to go with a large funding but a small market. So what that means is, since you have that capital behind you already, you can take your time into easing into the market and just starting small while just building up the ladder in terms of your consumers and as a whole. You don't want to go in the deep end in a big market and don't know what you're doing, how all these other experienced entrepreneurs are doing right now. So you have to keep that in mind when you're doing that. Also, one is the people question. Do you have the right team? Team is super important in your business venture, because your team as a whole builds the foundation of your company, or as your business, sorry. Because you're not a one man in your whole business, in your company, because if you're just a one man as your company, it will never work. There's so many different aspects that you need for your business in order to make it a smooth sailing for the rest of the years. So building the right team with the right mindsets, with the right position.